Welcome back to another episode of NewOrleans.Football presented by PJ's Coffee. We're coming to you from our studio on Vets, right upstairs from Matt Bauer's new pre-owned dealership, 3750 Vets. Make sure you come up here and check them out. They'll get you a great car at a great price. And if you want a new car, check out one of his many dealerships throughout the region. We got an excellent show for you guys today. I'm here with Mike and Kevin, and our first topic today is presented by Shea Bear Insurance, the Earhart Agency. We know all the talk. We know all the hype. We know everybody's looking at QB and pass catcher and running back and pass rusher. But should offensive tackle be a bigger need for the Saints? We'll start with Kevin because he's the guest
our
today.
guest.
Yeah.
I'm out the gates hot. The first thing that comes to mind when I think of that pick is again,
Yeah.
right? The
Fair.
first thing, I think it would be 3 and 4 years. So obviously that's something that you think about. But, since this draft started, I've said, just bring BPA, right? Whoever's the best player available, pick it. So that's how I feel fundamentally, but I think I'm contradicting myself when I say it just be a little bit of a boring pick, right? I just think that, we've seen that, them do that recently. And I think it would also kind of say maybe the Penny pick was a failure, maybe a final admittance.
I can say that already.
I'm I know your feelings on Penny, but it's he wasn't a horrible run blocker last year. He was somewhat serviceable. To me, that would be them saying, okay, we've moved past him. And, my guess it would be a left tackle. So if you move Fuaga to right tackle, that's also not a ringing endorsement on him. That's saying, hey, we drafted this guy high, we put him at left tackle. Next year we're moving him over. If he was great at left, you wouldn't be looking to move him, I think. So it's not an exciting pick, but I understand. You can never go wrong building the O-line. You don't want to make those picks, but they tend to play off better in the season than they do.
I'm okay with moving Fuaga because I feel like both tackle spots are premium positions. He's got a little bit shorter arms. He was playing off prototype. They put him on the left side. I'm okay with it. I get the idea of the value or whatever, but if that's where he's best, if you drafted a right tackle at that spot, I wouldn't feel bad about it. I feel like it's a worthwhile pick. On the Penning thing, I think both things can be true. I think he can be serviceable and became fine, but he's also somebody that you should be trying to move on from at this point. And I feel like I got enough evidence of that to this point. I don't want to sign him to a second contract. He's not my future of the position. It sucks absolutely if you got to draft an offensive tackle right now. And this is the setback of missing on that pick is you take that pick and now you have to make another pick. And if you are missing on any position, it sets you back because you have to reinvest resources. We're seeing it defensive end. You picked Davenport, then you picked Peyton Turner, then you picked Foskey, then you had to sign Chase Young, then you had to sign Chase Young again. There's a fallout to the missing on these picks, and this is where they're at. But the thing is if you paint your house and you bought a crooked crew and they came in and did it with cheap paint and it's chipping after 3 years, you just got to paint the house again, and it sucks. You don't want to spend the money on that. You might have wanted to go on the European vacation, but your summer vacation money now has to come to protecting your house. And I think a little bit that's where the Saints at. Now, they'd be a year early on it. They don't have to take the tackle now, but I think it is a pick that's within their realm, either this year or next year. And if you're in a draft where it's man, a lot of these players aren't great at these skill position players, and pick 10 is the same as pick 40, which is what people are saying about this draft, I'm okay. I'm maybe okay going tackle here, depending on what else is on the board. But I'm with you, BPA all the way.
A couple of things about your analogy. First of all, I think that painting story, I think you changed a couple of the details. That's a true story from Nick's life that I can remember.
I never got my house painted.
I'm saying a couple details were changed.
Sure.
I want to protect the names involved. I know that story felt really true. But also, European vacation is the perfect analogy for Ashton Genty. He's the European vacation. They need to paint the house, and Ashton Genty. That crystallizes the conversation we've had a million times. Ashton Genty is probably going to be a top 5 pick in this draft, though. I have a feeling. Look, I flew in Kevin just to back me up on this because he can attest that our last members only pod that we do on Thursdays, I said as boring as it'd be, my dream scenario would be they find a left tackle. I mean, I think it is boring. I think it's a shame that they have to be doing this again. But this is the first time they've picked 9th since 2008. 17 years since they've picked 9th. And if you're picking 9th, I want my quarterback or my defensive end or my left tackle. I don't want a piece. I want a foundation. And that's a foundation position. So, yes, it sucks that you've missed before. Yes, it sucks that you've invested all these resources. But you're in the top 10 now. Get me, a core piece that they have to rebuild this whole roster while they have a chance. Get me a core piece. I would love it if either Will Campbell or look, Armand Membu, the guy from Missouri, is a right tackle. Will Campbell might be a left guard. Kelvin Banks is a left tackle that people aren't quite as sure about. There's a couple more later in round one. Talifuka played right tackle in college. Like, it's a position where I would, if the Saints got one and they were truly loved him and said, we saw him as a top 5 player in this year's draft class, I would not mind back-to-back years of offensive tackles. I would feel better about their future if they're like, we're going to build around this, then we're going to fill in the receivers and the running backs and the quarterback. But if they had the 11th pick in the draft last year? Or was it a little later, 14th? It was the 14th pick in the draft on Fuaga, 9th pick on the draft on a left tackle this year. I'd feel better about the team long term. I really would. My problem is I don't have the name. If I had the name, I'd stand on the table for him. I don't. If Will Campbell might be a left guard and Membu might be a right tackle and Banks might be worth more like the 15th pick than the 9th pick, that's my only problem with it this year.
I don't think the tackles are supposed to be great in this draft. I mean, look, I can't sell it though. Like I'd hate it. Like it speaks to a bigger issue of missed draft picks overall. And if you separate them, I love it. But if you kind of got to put it all together in the same basket, and it's the 3rd tackle, and you traded up for one of them, this should be solved.
Yeah.
Like that can't be lost within it. And I don't think anybody at home watching the draft should feel good about it. They should be pissed. Like it's not a good position to be in to need to do this. But the fact is, you have to do it. Like either this year or next year. I don't want them re-signing Trevor Penning and trying to make that happen. Yeah,
I just think they got to get and to your point, Nick, they have to get the pick right, though, right? That's the main thing because, say Penning is a more valuable pick at offensive tackle at the time than maybe like a linebacker or a safety, right? I would trade a good, strong safety for Penning right now or a good linebacker for him because it's just about getting like the better player on the team, even though, to your point, Mike, I do think the positional value matters. And I get the feeling that's what Moore prioritizes coming out of Philadelphia. So that could be something that he sees as a model for success, and he can, try to run something similar here, right? But I just think it's about getting the picks right. So if I see in any pick Thursday night, I'm going to say, just how did they get there? Like, what was the process? Did you leave someone way better on the board because you're trying to push in a need, or did you really feel like this was a player, right? And if they felt like if the process is good, then whoever they get is fine, right? But long as they went through like, all right, we're trying to get someone that's going to have an impact because like this pick is too high to miss.
Yeah.
Give me a name in 2 sentences. Who's your guy at 9 overall? Doesn't have to be an offensive tackle. Just one guy. Who's the guy that you want to see him leave the draft with?
That's the thing. That's exactly what I said on that pod is I wish I loved a left tackle. Like, honestly, I would take Will Campbell and try him at left tackle, and if he ends up at left guard.
He's going at 4.
He's going at 4.
Realistically, who you taking? Who you got? You got one on the top of your mind?
Give me Jinxie or Warren. Just someone who I know can make an impact.
I'm all like, give me Genty, not Genty, give me Warren. Yeah, those are my 1, 2.
Yeah, based on what draft analysts are saying, Warren's the guy I'm most sold on. But if the Saints convinced me that Shedeur Sanders or Kelvin Banks or Michael Williams, the defensive end, if they convinced me we had a top 5 grade on a quarterback, a left tackle, or a defensive end, that would be the best case scenario for me.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, obviously the quarterback, but like I just don't. Yeah. I don't think they see him that way, and it's starting to sound like people are maybe believing that Cam Ward might be the only first-round quarterback in this draft. That's going to be incredibly interesting. I think where he goes ends up defining the whole entire thing. Looking back at the drafts over the last few years, I think since 2017, the thing that stands out the most is that they are not making a high volume of picks. I think it's like 34 picks over those last 6 drafts. Just going into it, not counting comp picks, you should have 42. So you're down 8, no comp picks coming in. Is that the biggest issue right now is volume? Do they need to take a higher volume approach with their drafting? Let's say over the next 3 years as you're doing this rebuild, should you be going into it saying, this is the guy, we're going to target him? You can't have a guy every single year, right? Like what should the approach be? Should it be focus shooting or volume approach?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? And I'm going to try to thread the needle here because it's first you think you don't answer the question you get asked. But, I don't think it's a volume issue, though. I don't think it's a volume issue because, the 7 rounds in the draft, the last 4, they've had at least 5 picks, right? So and then I look at the picks that they're making and they're just, they're not landing. I was looking at the last few drafts, right? The this draft that just happened, we'll see what happens with the Rattler draft and Fuaga Kool-Aid. 2013, it didn't move the needle forward. That's the one with
23.
23.
I mean, I'm sorry, 23, with Kendra, Foskey, those guys.
That's turning into the ugliest draft they've
Yeah,
had
and
of all
I
of them.
wrote probably a bad draft. 2022, we still figuring out Alante, right? Olave may be the only good thing that come out of there. That was a 5-pick draft. 2021, the first round pick, that Peyton Turner didn't work out. So I think it's more about they need to hit on their picks better, right? First and foremost, because I don't think that if you add 8 picks to this list, I don't know how different it'll look.
Sure.
But let's say you got 4 players out of the 8.
Then
That helps with your depth at
that
least a
helps
little
a lot,
bit.
though. But they're not the guys
Yeah.
that they're
Yeah, they're missing in general too.
Everybody, yeah.
No doubt about it. I think they got to draft better and draft more players. Like 2020, it's first round, third round, 7th round. Tommy Stevens, the worst pick they ever made. 2022.
I told you.
Oh, that was a joke, man. That was a joke. 22, it was first, second, then not again until the 5th. Last year, it was first, second, not again until the 5th. I mean, 23, they only had a first-round pick because of the Sean Payton trade. Like, they didn't even have their own pick there because they traded it away. It's both. I think it's both. I think they got to shoot for volume. I'm okay every now and then with having a guy targeted, but you can't have one every single year.
Exactly.
You can't be like, this is the guy every year, and then, like, wait a minute. Like, these aren't turning into franchise-changing players. Like, if you're doing that, like, that guy has to be – I feel like if you're trading future assets to move up in the first or get back in the first, that guy has to be a Pro Bowler. Like that's the barometer. It can't be, well, Trevor Penning's serviceable or Marcus Davenport's good when he's on the field. No, like if you're putting 2 picks into a guy, like he needs to be foundational TJ Watt. Like that's what your defensive end has to be, at least to me.
I changed my answer to the last question that you made me pause in. My 2 sentences, what I want the Saints to do to it, number 9 is trade down. And I have not been a trade down truther all these years. A lot of people, ever since Belichick used to do it, trade down, that's how you're supposed to run the draft. I was okay with them trading up for Brandon Cooks when they needed one more piece, et cetera, et cetera. Now I want them to trade down, mostly because some of my favorite players are supposed to go 15th and they're picking 9th. Like, I'm fine trading down, and then you decide between Michael Williams and Kelvin Banks or whoever's left. So I want them to trade down this year. But, yeah, I'm a little more with Kevin. All I care about, not all I care about, but day 3 picks don't move the needle for me too much. So when we talk about a total of they should have made 42 picks, they've only made 34. A lot of those missing picks are rounds 4, 5, 6, 7, and
that's what your free depth comes from.
no,
though.
I get it, but
like you're trading them away. You ain't getting guys.
Those
that
are the
fill in.
ones that they've widely missed on. Me and B did a segment on that Friday. How bad they've been missing on those. But yeah, you gotta hit in the first 3 rounds. In the last 7 drafts they've made 7 first-rounders. One of them was Brian Brzee, so they really only made 6 of their own first-rounders out of 7 that they should have made. 5 second-rounders, 5 third-rounders. So they have lost 1 first-rounder they should have had, 2 second-rounders they should have had, 2 third-rounders they should have had. That does hurt very, very much. The bigger issue, though, is that they've missed on the picks. I mean, those premium picks. You cannot make only 6 of your 7 first-round picks and have one of them be Cesar Ruiz, 2 of them be Marcus Davenport, one of them be Peyton Turner, one of them be Trevor Penning. Brzee's okay, but that should be the foundation of their team, and it's not.
You got to be. Yeah, I think I fundamentally disagree. Day 3 picks, I think, have tremendous value because, like, if you're hitting on Bub Means and he becomes your 4th wide receiver, you don't have to go sign somebody. Like, you have to hit on those. Like, it's the UDFAs too. You can't say like, well, I got value UDFA players because they're free players on the team. You got to make them picks too. Like, I think you have to obviously hit on your picks, but you can't sell out on day 3 of the draft every year. You can't say we're not picking. We're only going to pick 4 guys. Like, you have to swing the bat like 7, 8 times.
Like Adam Trotman can't happen.
Yes. Yeah. But then, like, if you're swinging the bat, you get Caden Ellis. You give yourself a chance with A.T. Perry. Like, you're putting yourself in the realm. And yeah, granted, like, I think those are longer shots down there. I think you're kind of blindly swinging the bat, but you got to hit on some of them. And if you're hitting on, let's say, every 3 years, there's 9 guys, and you're hitting on 3 or 4 of them that are just either A, special teams players or worthy of having a 53 spot, like, that's depth on your team. And then when dudes get hurt, you have players. And when you don't have those picks and dudes get hurt, you're trying to hope that like this free guy that busted somewhere else that came to your team in camp is making the team, and then
Don't know the
like
playbook, can't be around the building.
like that stuff, like it does matter. Like missing on Nick Saldiveri does have a cost,
No question.
just as much as I think it is anywhere else, because now you don't have depth at that position.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that like when the Saints were good, they would hit on a late round pick somehow.
Oh yeah,
right?
of course.
Like, and
Carl
I think
Nicks, Jermon Bushra.
I think
Colston.
that's part of what I can just see. I'm like, they're just not hitting on like they would just have a guy that they would find, and we would be like, how did this guy get passed on by all these teams? Like even going far as back as having Pierre late. Caden Ellis was someone that, worked out later. It's just they haven't been – I think they got C.D. Deuce in the 4th round. He was good for them when he was there for a bit. So I think just that not being able to steal a player back there also just kind of exacerbates.
They haven't hit on a day 3 pick since Caden Ellis. And part of it's like not playing the game, but it's also missing on the picks that they have made. It's both. Like
it's both.
I think it's both.
Getting rid of that
That's how
volume.
you get here. It's both.
Yeah, it's like I can't type. I got a broken thumb and a broken index finger. Which is it? It's like my finger's broken, right? It's both of them, right? And I just think they're not picking enough because I agree, like the volume of picks.
Hitting on like a Will Clapp or a Zach Streif or Marcus Colston, like those have tremendous value. And Colston's obviously like a huge out. So is Streif. But like a Will Clapp, hitting on a Will Clapp, a guy that can like spot, start, rotate in, be a foundational part of your team, like that has tremendous value.
No question. And I'm not belittling the value of those picks, but I'm just saying I don't think they become as talent deplete. I mean, I think the number one reason is 7 years of first round picks, 0 Pro Bowlers. I mean, you can't 0 Pro Bowl appearances.
List,
yeah, that's number one.
But like the infantry has to be made up of these day 3
They
guys.
missed on both. They missed on both.
Organizationally, I don't think that they value those picks as much.
They don't.
And I think,
and I think that's part of the problem. Like they're telling
problem.
us with their actions that these picks don't mean as much to us, and I think that it just exacerbates the problem more and more.
Yeah, they view them as like UDFAs, and we'll make up for it in the back half and bring up value in the middle. And like, I just feel like it's gotten so thin all the way around, depth and talent. Like it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna hit a quick break here, and we will be back. This segment was presented by Hard Hide Punch-a-Toll Strawberry Whiskey. We'll be back with more show right after this.
Rouse's Markets is voted best grocery store in New Orleans, best grocery store in Baton Rouge, Mississippi, Gulf Coast, Thibodaux, Houma, Hammond, Lake Charles, Mobile, year after year. Thank you for choosing us best grocery store on the Gulf Coast. Number 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
The number 1 grocery store
In Mississippi, Alabama,
Louisiana. 1 million customers a week can't be wrong. Welcome to Rouse's.
The NewOrleans.Football show is proudly presented by PJ's Coffee. PJ's Coffee has some of the best drinks that you can find. They have locations all over the city. They have pastries and everything else you need to get your day started. So go check them out. NewOrleans.Football is proudly sponsored by Urban South Brewery, the makers of Paradise Park Lager. I love supporting local breweries, and when looking for a refreshing, easy drinking beer, I always recommend Paradise Park. In fact, I think it might be the best game day beer out there. If you want something a little lighter, try Paradise Light. It's everything I love about Paradise Park with just 96 calories and 2.6 carbs. And if you're looking for a family-friendly place to watch the game, I'd recommend Urban South's Tap Room in the Lower Garden District. They've got 15 TVs, 30 unique beers on tap, and mouth-watering urban smash burgers. The whole family will want to make Urban South their new living room, because at Urban South, they take laid back seriously. Looking for the best insurance coverage at the lowest price? Look no further than Chabert Insurance, the Earhart Agency. They are a local independent insurance agency right here in New Orleans, specializing in home, flood, and auto insurance. At Chabert Insurance, the Earhart Agency, their dedicated team will shop every available carrier in the market, ensuring you get the most comprehensive coverage at the lowest possible price. Why settle for less when you can have the best? Trust Chabert Insurance, the Earhart Agency, to protect what matters most to you. I do. I've been a client of theirs since 2021. Call them today at 504-326-6526 or visit them online at Protected by Chabert. That's 504-326-6526. Chabert Insurance, the Earhart Agency, your local insurance experts. Hard Hide Punch-a-Toll Strawberry Whiskey is an 86 proof blend of aged wheat bourbon, American light whiskey, and fresh Punch-a-Toll strawberries. Blended in New Orleans, it is not for the thin-skinned. Look for it in your favorite stores, bars, and restaurants. Attention Saints fans, don't let pests and termites invade your home field. Trust the team at Red Pest Solutions to tackle those unwelcome visitors. Call the Red Man today for unbeatable pest and termite control. Score peace with no pest. Visit redpest.com, REDDPEST.com. Welcome back to our studio on Veterans Memorial Boulevard, right upstairs from Matt Bauer's pre-owned dealership up here on Vets. Make sure you go check him out for your pre-owned needs. And if you need a new car, check him out at one of his many dealerships throughout the region. All the talk going into Thursday night, obviously, is on the quarterback class. I don't think any of us are expecting him to pick a QB at 9. What are just the parting thoughts on this going into Wednesday night? Like, we're going to have Matt Miller talking about next year's class after this. So if they decide to punt on it, what are they looking at next year? Do they have to force a pick?
No, but I wish that was on the table. If they had a guy ranked 21st on their board at quarterback, I'd say take him. I'm worried they don't have anyone in their top 40. Like obviously we don't know for sure, but boy, all signs are pointing to it would really be forced at 9. And I think if we were going to make a prediction, maybe they do trade back into the back half of round 1. Maybe that's the best way to handle it. They're not just waiting till 40. I wish they could just wait till 40. But if you're waiting till 40 or trading up into the 20s because a guy's not worth 9, then how much more of a sure thing is he even than Spencer Rattler? So I wish there was an answer here. I wish there was even a Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix answer that they could convince me they loved a guy. But if they don't take one at 9 and they take one at 24 instead, they've already not convinced me, So I think they're just bringing in another contender to compete with Spencer Rattler if they don't take one at 9. But I don't think they're going to take one at 9. So I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that's – I don't want them to force it, but I wish there was someone worth forcing it for.
I think it would be a mistake to force that pick because we just had the conversation about how picks can set you back. And sometimes that's acceptable, right? But I think right now, a year setback for the Saints is almost like a little catastrophic because if you pick a quarterback in this draft and, as you said, Mike, if you're picking them the fact of the matter is you pick them at 20-something and you didn't pick them at 9, that says something. That means that you're at least willing for someone else to get him. Right, because he's a quarterback. Some people didn't expect Penix to go as high last year. So I think that if you pick a quarterback this year, it maybe increases the odds of you being out of the quarterback market next year. That's when you can really make an impact on your franchise, right? And like you're either striking gold with Spencer Rattler or you're picking one, right? It's like, and there's something in between, but it's not a lot, right? I don't think there's a lot in there, and so I think that you need to strategize and think for the future a little bit, right? I think that you need a quarterback, right? And I understand Kellen Moore being a first-year quarterback, you want to be competitive, and I think it's a little bit of a weird situation there. But if you force this pick, right? What if you have to trade a pick from next year to get up? Like the Saints,
God, please
first
no,
and second
please
round
no.
pick of next year are probably two of the most valuable assets in the NFL right now. So I just think that anything around those picks, like stay away from it.
Yeah.
But forcing it, I think, can set you back because you're locked in for a quarterback for a year, and you're not picking one of these guys. You're not picking Nico. You're not picking maybe Arch Manning. You're not picking the kid from Penn State. You're not picking the LSU quarterback. There's a lot of guys coming out next year who look a lot better from further away than the guys do now. So I would be thinking about that.
I think there's two things here. A, you don't force a pick. But I think there's two things at play here. Like there's there's two conversations. Like if someone comes to me and they say they should just take a quarterback regardless of how they have them ranked, I vehemently disagree with that. If you want to say, I disagree with their scouting, this guy's worth the 9th pick, I will evaluate that with you. And I think that's what the conversation is going to end up being after this, and that's how it should be had. You aren't going to know on draft night if they were right or wrong. It's going to take a lot of time to do it. And if they bypass Shedeur Sanders and he becomes a star, the scouting was wrong. But you can't take someone that is 60th on your board right now that you don't see is worth that. Yeah. You can't just go, I'm going to take Jackson Dart even though I think he's a 3rd rounder. I'm going to take this guy because I think he's this. You can't do that. But if you want to frame it as I disagree with their scouting and this is why, I can have that conversation. But if it's just no, just take one, reach, swing, I don't subscribe to that. You have to trust your process and your scouting. If your scouting fails you, then I think you start having a different conversation about why it went wrong and how you don't get it wrong next time and what needs to change to do that. We're going to bring in Matt Miller now to talk about next year's quarterback class so we know what to look for if the Saints decide to bypass on this year's class. We are joined now by my favorite draft analyst. I'll tell that to Field too. He's our guy, but I got to rock with Matt. Matt has the most amazing journey, I think, to get to where he's at. Had a site like ours at one point. Now is the man on ESPN. He's joining us to talk about next year's draft class. We'll get a couple in about this year's QB draft class, but the conversation we're kind of having here is what happens if the Saints decide to bypass on this quarterback class? Derek Carr never comes back, never plays again. Who are the guys that would be there in 2026 that the Saints could possibly be excited about, assuming they have a bad season, they're picking high in the order next year?
I disappoint you guys by saying that Arch Manning will probably not be in the 2026 NFL draft class.
They'll still be bad then too. That's okay.
That's a 2-year plan. You got to think long term, guys. Everyone I've talked to, and I'm not going to claim to be close with Arch Manning's uncles or dad, but everyone I've talked to says that they understand the process for him. He needs 2 years as a starter in college. There's a magic number, 25 starts in college before you go to the NFL. The amount of success you have changes exponentially. I think we'll see Arch in Austin for 2 years. But there is a familiar name that will be available at the top of the 2026 draft class for you guys, and that's Garrett Nussmeier, who obviously has some connections to the state of Louisiana, has some connections to the coaching staff with the New Orleans Saints. So I think that is a name, as my dog prepares to bark here, I think that's a name that will be near the top of lists as we get ready for 2026. Nussmeier will be up there. Drew Aller from Penn State, who decided to go back to college for another year, he's going to be up there. But it is a much more, I think, exciting quarterback class with guys like Lenora Sellers. Obviously, Nico going from Tennessee to UCLA. He's a name that you at least have to be watching. So I would say next year, and we feel like this every year, right? But next year looks like it will have more top-end talent, whereas this year has more spread-out depth.
Does the Nussmeier thing qualify as like Brown and Bronny? Like, is it as cool as that, or like? but honestly, what do you think of him? Like, how does he? Like, I was hearing a little bit of hype. It sounded like this year, and then it kind of tailed off. How excited should people be about him relative to the guys in this year's class? And I guess all these guys relative to the guys in this year's class.
Yeah, Nick, I do think that, again, the top end talent is a little more exciting. And I would say Nussmeier is going to be somebody that's floated out early as a potential number 1 overall pick. He's a little bit undersized, 6 foot, 200 pounds, but he has a big arm and he moves around really well. And we're kind of in this era of the small quarterback anyway. You know, a lot of guys are 6'1", 6'2". So it's not a huge obstacle that he's not built like Drake May or Justin Herbert because he moves so well. And you're right. He had a lot of hype about midseason, and then he had some tough games. And I would say the same thing happened to Drew Aller. Well, like, he had some big games and then he kind of fizzled out and didn't have the marquee moments that we were looking for. And I think Nussmeier is going to be in that. He was in that same area this year where there was that hype. Maybe he could come out and jump into a weak 2025 quarterback class. I think he made the right decision going back to LSU, getting another year of starts under his belt, showing off some of that talent that he has, some of the arm talent, but also just his experience level has to come up. And the game's going to slow down for him once he starts to get into, 20, 25 starts. We're going to see him become a different player, is the hope, at least, that he is somebody that's ascending instead of descending, which happened to some of these quarterbacks like Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck, who we thought were going to be big names this year.
Matt, we can bookmark this and play it again in September. But I think everyone knew Nussmeier. Everyone probably knew Drew Aller, and everyone obviously knows Arch Manning. But who are the guys to watch and hope for the Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels like ascension to be like, all right, now this class is cooking? I mean, is Sellers one of those guys that could become really special, or is there anyone that could become special?
Yeah, Sellers could. I mean, he's got the build, right? He's huge and he's got a big arm. I think he's got to make better decisions, but it's also going to be tough because that South Carolina team lost a lot. Now they bring back some guys. Nick Harbert, wide receiver, is a freak show. He's built like DK Metcalf. They're going to have Dylan Stewart at defensive end, but they turn over a lot. So he's definitely someone to watch. Now, I think Cade Klubnik ended the year as well as any quarterback in the country did at Clemson. Another guy who, not the biggest guy, but just played super well down the stretch. So he would be in that mix of, when I think about somebody that's trajectory is on the right plane right now and is going in the right direction, he's someone to watch. A sleeper that I will throw out there is John Mateer going from Washington State to Oklahoma. He has tools. He is a gunslinger. He's a fiery dude. It's like there's some Gardner Minshew with just the way that he plays, but like a plus version of that. So he's going to be a ton of fun. So if you want a name that's kind of out there a little bit, I would say John Mateer's got a shot to do some really big things next season.
Yeah, hey man. So when you think about, April 21st, 2024, right? A year from now, I mean,
26.
a year from, 2024, a year ago, what were you saying about this current class, and kind of compare that to what you think about this 2026 class? And, if you're one of the strategic guys for the Saints and making a decision, do you look at the draft and do you think about like skipping one, or is one class just so much better than the other? Can you just talk about the difference between the two and how you feel about them?
Call me out here. I like it. So last year at this time, we were saying that this year's quarterback class was full of potential, but guys who had to take the step. Carson Beck needed to take the step. Quinn Ewers needed to take the step. We all knew who Shedeur Sanders was. He was obviously a hot name. Once Cam Ward decided to go to Miami instead of entering last year's draft, he was viewed as a player that would be very much in the mix. Not at number one overall. The jump that he took was huge. But I do think, to your point, teams have to be scouting ahead. And this is something I learned early in my career is teams are, at quarterback especially, they are looking ahead to saying, hey, if we don't love Shedeur Sanders, if we don't love Jackson Dart, how do we like next year's class? And you try to be a year early on your evaluation. One of the things that really helped me in my career was in 2017, I had an article that said if Josh Allen comes out this year, he will be a top 3 quarterback drafted. And he was a sophomore at Wyoming. No one was talking about Josh Allen at that time, but NFL teams were, which is where I got that information from. Now, obviously, Josh went back to Wyoming for another year and ended up being the number 7 overall pick in the draft. And he's an all-pro. He's a great player, but teams are usually a year ahead. Now, the important part to remember is it is a process. Carson Beck is a prime example of that. 1 year ago, I think if you look at way too early mock drafts for 2025, Carson Beck was the number 1 overall pick for a lot of people because you expected him to, to continue where he was at, to maybe even get better. And instead, he got worse. He started turning the ball over. Then he got hurt. So sometimes guys do regress. And so I think it's a little bit risky at times, especially when we're not talking about, Caleb Williams type prospects where years in advance, this guy's going to be a dude. We can all anticipate the come out of nowhere transfer guys, but I would say next year doesn't have a Caleb Williams. It doesn't have a player that we were saying 2 years early, hey, this is going to be a guy, or even, Drake May was that way. Justin Herbert was definitely that way. Even Bryce Young and CJ Stroud were kind of that way. So next year doesn't have that guy right now that is, hey, here's the number 1 overall pick for next year's draft. We're going to get this out there really early. There's not that. I hate this term, but there's not the generational quarterback prospect next year.
For no reason at all, just totally random name here, just picking it out of nowhere. Give me your Tyler Shuck scouting report.
Totally random, no reason. I like Tyler Shuck. I'm worried about the injuries, and I always worry about age. And I said this last year about Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. I always worry when a guy figures it out at like 24. Are you figuring it out because you're 6 years older than that corner you're playing against? Or are you figuring it out because you've just had that time and the experience? I've talked to college coaches who swear by experience is the most important trait for a college quarterback because the game just starts to slow down for you so much. So I like Tyler Shuck. Watching him throw at the Senior Bowl, I was really blown away by how well he spun it, how athletic he was. If you told me a year ago we'd be talking about Tyler Shuck as a top 40 draft pick, I would have laughed in your face. I would have told you were crazy. But the Brahms are pretty damn good at coaching quarterbacks, and I want to give him a lot of credit to, staying healthy while not sacrificing his style of play. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, to continue to just go out there and play his type of ball, even with 2 broken collarbones in your past and what do you have, another arm injury? But he still plays the exact same way. I remember watching his spring game at Oregon right after Justin Herbert got drafted. So, I've been watching this dude for 7 years, and I love the fact that he's still the same kind of gunslinger that he's always been.
Last question from us. Obviously, here, the depth of knowledge that you have here, this is just for my own knowledge. I'm just curious, like you can rattle off every QB in this class. This draft ends. How quickly could you put out like a top 100? Like where are you at already on next year's class? It sounds like you're already like deep in that bag.
I know this because I sent it to some teams this week
Look at
to
this.
like start to get ahead. I'm at 230 players for next
Man.
year, like with notes on them because I keep notes on them during the college football season because otherwise it's impossible to like actually go back and it would take years to do it, right? So you try to keep good notes during the college football season. Like, if I'm watching South Carolina, if I'm watching Kyle Kennard, well, let me go ahead and get notes on, other guys on that defense. So you try to cheat a little bit and stay ahead, but it's fun, man. I get so excited by Sunday morning, I'll be flying home from Green Bay. And even if I don't publish one, I'll do a mock draft for fun just to kind of see where team needs are at and see where player values are. I can't get enough of it. It's kind of a sickness at this point.
Unbelievable insight. Thank you for your time, man. Make sure you guys are checking Matt out on ESPN. We don't got to tell you that because everybody's watching him anyhow. Thanks for the time, man.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Hank.
All right, it's now time for the question of the day presented by Aaron Rose. What do you guys think would be the biggest disappointment for the Saints? Draft ends when it's over. What's the biggest disappointment for you if blank occurs?
I'm going first here because I'm going to steal Kevin's answer from earlier. Because look,
like that, right?
Kevin nailed it though when he said, "Do not trade any 2026 picks," because the unfortunate reality is those might be gold. I mean, that could be the number 1 pick in the draft. It could be a top 5 pick in the draft. The second round pick could be a top 35 pick in the draft. So I want them to, if they don't trade down, I want them to at least make at least 3 picks in the top 71 this year. Make at least keep your top 3 picks next year. Those golden resources, use them all.
Yeah. I mean, you stole mine, so I'm going to go you, right? Like,
Yeah.
You did me like that, yeah. And just don't reach for nothing, right? Just don't reach, go through a process, follow your process. And whatever you get to as a result of that process, I'm cool with it, right? But just follow a good process and don't trade those.
Sellers puts it all together. Like, he could be amazing. Like, I just would hate to see him give away a potential golden ticket for a bronze ticket this year. Like, I just don't want to see him do it. So we're all in agreement on that one. Hold on to your picks, make your picks, don't reach, do that, and you mitigate the possibility for disappointment. We are now going to be joined by my guy, Neil Stratton, wrote the book Value Picks, great author, runs a very interesting website called Inside the League that kind of acts as that middle point between the team side and the agency side. They have a scouting seminar every year, one of the most plugged in behind the scenes people in the whole entire NFL. He has some great insight on the process of drafting Mike Thomas. Neil joins us now. Total Maintenance is one of the largest locally owned home and commercial service providers in South Louisiana and serve the greater New Orleans and Baton Rouge markets. They have a membership program that gets you 2 tune-up visits for AC and heating, as well as club membership discounts of 15% on all repairs, half off of all diagnostic charges, and 3-year warranties on most repairs for membership clients. This is usually priced at the low price of $24.95 a month per system, but if you tell Total Maintenance that you found them through NOF, they'll lower the price to $20.95 per month per system for as long as you keep the membership active. Services include AC and heating service and replacement, electrical service, plumbing service, as well as generator service and installation. They are Total Maintenance. Find them at tm-ac.com or give them a call at 504-841-3300, or if you're in the Baton Rouge area, 225-480-1000. Hey, if you're into the fried stuff, and let's be honest, who isn't? Bobby Hebert's Cajun Cannon Restaurant just stepped it up. Their new cheese sticks actually stretch. The fried okra is crisp and seasoned just right. And the fried green tomatoes, that crawfish cream sauce takes it over the top. They're open every day, and they deliver late when the cravings hit. Bobby Hebert's Cajun Cannon Restaurant. Delicious food, superior service. Whether you are a local New Orleanian or a fan in town for the game, get your pre- and post-game fired up at Aaron Rose. Local chaos and local love for the black and gold. Wake up and live with daily drink specials, mimosas, screwdrivers, Bloody Marys, and hot or frozen Irish coffees, all just $3 or $4 between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Aaron Rose, half a block from Bourbon Street in the French Quarter, 811 Conti Street.
Here at the Queen Casino, indulgence knows no bounds. Prepare your taste buds for an extraordinary culinary journey. Start your day at Capital Coffee. Craving something different? Three Walks Noodle Bar offers a tantalizing selection of Asian delights. At 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails, savor American cuisine with a twist. Or ascend to the loft for an elevated experience. Enjoy artesian grazing boards and exquisite craft cocktails. Join us at the Queen Casino. Your royal adventure awaits.
All right, we're joined now by my guy, Neil Stratton, the man behind Inside the League, the author of Value Picks, the drama, decisions, and details behind 8 selections in the 2016 NFL Draft. One of the most plugged-in guys in the NFL, has a great chapter in there about Mike Thomas. Neil, just give us a big picture about the book and just some of the stuff that's in it.
Well, when I first started thinking about writing this book, it intrigued me because this is, for those that don't remember, this is the Laramie Tunsil draft. This was the remember where you were when this happened draft. When the Bong video came out and everyone is watching incredibly while he falls from potentially top 5 to 13. And so it was really interesting to me to just kind of talk to people, talk to scouts about what that was like, when it was happening. But as I began to do that, I began to realize, man, there are a lot of players whose draft was pretty interesting for a number of reasons. And so we focused on 8 players. And one of those, of course, is Michael Thomas. So that's kind of the evolution of kind of going inside, getting the inside draft story on Thomas and a number of other great players that were in that draft. It's been kind of interesting to chronicle all that stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, Michael Thomas is obviously of great interest to us. I was fascinated by, this gives me more faith in scouting. Like how many people had everything that was good about him and everything that was bad about him. The most fascinating part of the whole thing, not to give it all away, is that his work ethic was well known. Sounded like everyone recognized he was the hardest working guy, but that people viewed that as both a positive and a negative because of the character traits that came along with it. His like determination to he created a competition with other guys being drafted in the same class. I mean, do you remember your impressions of him at the time and then how they played out? Do you look back on it and realize that people really had it right with him?
Well, it's interesting because of the receivers that were drafted before him, each had traits that I think maybe Michael Thomas didn't have per se. Corey Coleman was a speedster. I think Fuller was maybe a more polished guy. Josh Doxson was a speed guy as well, but a little bigger. Treadwell wasn't as fast out of Ole Miss, but probably, I think going into the draft was probably the number 1 receiver, kind of fell off because his workouts didn't go so well. Sterling Shepard, I think, I never could get a good handle on why exactly the Giants took him. I think he was kind of a BPA pick, but when Michael Thomas came up, I think there were just a number of positives. But what other teams said was, we saw that he would be a guy that would excel in that offense, given the fact, it was a Sean Payton offense and the way they would use him as a big X and maybe even a little in the slot. And he had that versatility, but more than anything else, he had the speed and size combination as well as the grit that would really kind of take off with what the Saints were doing. And those first 3 seasons, 16, 17, I guess 4 seasons, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Wow, were they ever right? It's just that the way that it ended was certainly not the way everyone drew it up.
Neil, you got a great anecdote in there, and I don't want you to give everything away, but just Treadwell wanted to work out at the place Mike was working out at leading into the draft. Tell us just kind of what you found out about that situation.
Well, Michael Thomas trained with Tony Villani at XPE Sports. It's one of the top 3 or 4 training combine prep facilities in the nation. And obviously, Tony and Michael had really crafted a strategy for overtaking Treadwell as the number 1 wide receiver. As very often happens, someone will start off training at one location, not feel it, and then want to move to another location. And so Treadwell's agent reached out to Tony and said, "Hey, listen, man, we don't know if we're getting speed training we want. We're a little nervous about what his pro day numbers are going to look like. Could we come out to XPE?" And Tony said, "No, sorry. I've already got my guy. We're coming after you. We want to win. We want to defeat you. And so you stay where you are or go somewhere else, but you're not coming to Boca Raton." So that was an interesting story. And Tony had a lot to say about that draft and how hard he worked with Michael. And again, I think it reflected Thomas's work ethic as well as all the other things that kind of came out in much greater relief once he got to the league.
Yeah. So when you now we have enough time to go back and reflect on the Mike Thomas pick since it's been a few years. So when you go back and you look at that pick and you analyze it, like, would you say that was a good pick for the Saints in hindsight, or is it a pick that, because he had a lot of success, but it was very short lived. So, reflecting on it, is that a pick that they you think that they would make again, or they should make again, or is it something that they should probably not look to move on with?
Such a tough question. It's something that I've chewed on for a long time. Again, those first 4 seasons were unbelievable. But then once he signs that 5-year, $100 million contract, obviously 19 was the best of the best, but then it's ankle injury and then tweets and then ankle surgery in July when we thought people would have thought maybe it should have been in January. And then it's more tweets and it's more IR trips. I think on balance, I guess it was a good thing, but boy, I think the Saints have paid for it with some of the blowback that they've gotten from him. And that's not just, and it wasn't just his tweets about Drew Brees, but also Derek Carr. I mean, it's kind of been a legacy of trouble off the field and arrests and what have you. And I think it says a lot about the fact that here's a guy that was really accomplished and I think still could have done some things, but never got re-signed after the Saints cut him. And I think it was because nobody wanted that in their locker room.
Do you think they should have foreseen any of that coming just based on the draft lead? And I will push back a little, though. Like, I drafted him 100 out of 100 times. Like, I think what you got out of him was good. I think it went bad once it went bad. I think maybe where it leads into is once things got rocky, like maybe you should have seen that some of this was coming. Like, I think he's a great guy in the right situation. And then when things aren't going well, I think he just has a low tolerance for maybe some of that stuff.
I think all that's true. It's just that the ramifications of signing a contract like that, and at the time, that was quarterback money for a wide receiver. And that's a pretty controversial contract. And then, they basically got 1 year out of that contract. And then they were saddled with a major, and again, Kai Harley is very accomplished, and the Saints do what they do when it comes to cap. So they kind of, I guess if anyone is equipped to handle something like that, it was the Saints. But at the same time, it was a major commitment to a player, and they didn't get a lot of return on that investment after that. Now, I guess if you're looking at it just as the pick, and the fact they got 4 years out of a player, 4 magnificent years out of a player that was the 6th receiver taken, man, that's a home run. But I guess it's the contract, really, and what that did for him and the return they got on that investment that becomes problematic. So it's tough. It's kind of one, you go back and forth on it. I mean, he certainly outplayed the 5 receivers that were drafted ahead of him. You could argue that that Boyd, the receiver that was taken after him, was a comparable player that may have done the same thing in that offense. But if you're talking about wide receivers in the rest of that draft, Tyreek Hill's the only other one who really did anything, at least from the line of scrimmage, as a wide receiver. Now, he's done some magnificent things, but probably comes with the same baggage that Michael Thomas came with. So I think on balance, it was a really good pick, especially for his first 4 years. It's just the contract is what made it a hard thing.
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting because, like, Andrews Pete, I would argue, was a bad pick, but then keeping him around, I think, ended up being a good value and a good thing. But the pick itself was a miss. I think maybe in this case, the contract is where the trouble comes in. But, like, the second-round scouting and all that, I think that's one of the crown jewels in the Jeff Ireland, window here is finding him and making that pick in that range. Speaking of Jeff, for a long time, the infatuation with Ohio State, why do you think that existed?
I just think Jeff is a big conference kind of scout, and I think he knows that you got, I mean, we talk about the P4. Really what we have is the P2, a couple other really good conferences, and then the G5.
Yeah.
And so if you're talking about taking teams, players off of teams that play in the Big Ten and the SEC, they're playing on a different tier. And I think it's smart to do that because if they've proven themselves there, then they've proven themselves, then I think there's a better chance they can prove themselves in the NFL. And I support that. I think it's been a wise choice on balance, and more often than not, you're going to get a good player when you take a player from those areas.
Ohio State specifically, Olave, Werner, Lattimore, Thomas, Von Bell. You can go back pre-Jeff Ireland, Malcolm Jenkins. You got a Will Smith in there, LaCharles Bentley in there. There's 16 guys, or what, 15 guys going to get drafted from Ohio State this year. They better end up with another one this year. That's been like their best track record they've had. But it's interesting you did this focus on the 2016 draft. I think people sleep on how important the 2016 draft was for the Saints because 2017 was so incredible. But that second round first round was Sheldon Rankins. Not a huge hit, but not a huge miss either. I'd take that at 12 most years. I think you'd wish you hit more of a home run, but Michael Thomas and Von Bell in the second round, and then probably their best day 3 pick of the last decade, and David Onyemata in round 4. So that set the tone before 2017. Any lessons this team can learn? They have to rebuild this roster again. Did they do a better job in 2016 and 2017 of maybe like truly believing in the best player available approach or identifying traits they needed than they've done really in kind of 6 years of misses since then?
Well, I think you nailed it, Trip, because you look at 17, and I remember when the 17 draft happened, I was furious, okay? And I was like, man, why are we taking a running back? I keep saying we, sorry. Not very professional of me. Why are the Saints taking a running back in the 3rd round? Why are they taking a safety in the 2nd round? Why are they doing all these things? They're taking a try-hard defensive end out of a G5 school. What are they doing? This is ridiculous. And then I went back and I had lunch with a scout who lives in my area, and he would and I said, okay, well, let's talk about what the Saints did. And he starts smiling and nodding. And I said, what do you think about this Kamara kid? He's like, yeah, smiling and nodding more. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I don't know as much about the NFL draft as I thought I did. And the rest is history. The thing that I think the thing that entices me and again, as a Saints fan, excites me for this draft is there are so many needs that I don't think there's the temptation to chase a player like the Saints have done so many times over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think when you have that many needs, you can just go out and really follow your board, take the player that's there, and hopefully, and that's going to address the need. Again, the Saints have a lot of needs right now. And so I think you've got a better chance of doing that. The other thing I'm going to say, and this is probably something that scouts talk about a lot more than maybe people in the media, Sean Payton, his shadow loomed across their draft for many years. And I think that I don't think Jeff would ever say this, but he was overruled a number of times by Sean Payton. We've talked about y'all have talked about Garrett Grayson, and that was a reach. Marcus Davenport was a reach. A number of players along those lines. I don't think those picks are made if Ireland has more independence. And I think, and I hope that Moore will be able to allow Ireland to be more of his own man when it comes to the draft and not have to roll the dice on players that fit needs. Jeff is a guy who's, Nick, you've attended our draft seminar for the last 3 or 4 years. Out of those last 4, we've been handing out the Bartlist Award, which, without going into a lot of details, voted on by NFL scouts. Jeff's won 3 of those. All right, those aren't flukes, and I think that he's got the respect that in the industry that maybe a lot of people don't recognize. Let the guy cook. I think if he goes out there and can just follow his board and lean on his scouts, I think this team can draft well again, and I think they're poised to do that this year.
Yeah, that's interesting. And since you broke the seal, I've heard that Davenport was a big Sean guy. Sean really wanted him. I think the flip side of that is that he leads you to Alvin too. So like there was a good and a bad with that, but I definitely have heard a lot from scouts about how some of these picks over time and maybe some of the aggressiveness in the draft was spearheaded by the coach. So it leads to a question, and I think you kind of already answered it a little bit, but I kind of want to dive into it a little more because I think it's maybe the most interesting thing about the current configuration, because the feel that I have is that I think Kellen is going to probably defer a little bit to them, especially as he gets his footing and kind of starts building his own program. So was Sean a net positive or a net negative overall, just in terms of the draft? Not as a coach, just the draft.
Yeah, that's a tough one. We look at 17, and I think, I applaud Peyton because he was really pushing for Mahomes. And, and Jeff wrote the forward to my last book, and he talked about the evolution of that. Okay. And Mahomes, wow. But let's say the Saints had traded a bushel of picks for Patrick Mahomes. Well, they don't get Trey Hendrickson. They may not get Alvin Kamara. They may not get all those down the line players that they got in that draft because they would have had to package them to move up and get Mahomes. So, was he a net positive or a net negative? I'm going to say he's probably a net negative. I think especially since 16 when Ireland came in and made the draft his own. Those drafts, the three prior to that, when they had the 3 straight 7-9 seasons, they were kind of lost in the wilderness. Then you see 16, 17. Wow, what a difference, and almost overnight. And Tripp referenced a lot of the players that were taken later in that draft in 16 that we don't talk about as much, but 16 and 17 more or less form the backbone for those playoff runs. So, I think that Jeff is the guy that probably certainly was the MVP on draft day. And if there were negatives, I think more often than not, I think Peyton was the cause of that. So
Neil,
I guess, I'd say he wasn't a net negative when it comes to the draft.
It's funny you mentioned Jeff Ireland's forward in your other book. And that's the exact example I always thought of, because he tried to cut in and take Reuben Foster ahead of Ryan Ramczyk at the end of that. He was going rogue on that one, and luckily the 49ers bailed him out and took Reuben Foster. Obviously, though, I think Peyton was a driving force behind the Kamara pick that year too. So a lot of hits and a lot of misses there, which is true of probably everyone who's ever drafted.
Yeah. When you look at, you said that Ireland is a big college guy, right? He's picking. We was talking about the guys that he likes from Ohio State and things like that. But, in the recent drafts, they've picked, they've had Penning. He was a small school guy. The Davenport pick was from a small, he was a small school guy. You could say the same thing about Peyton Turner. So, you think that's maybe outside of Jeff's influence, given his preference for bigger schools, or do you think maybe those are, one-offs or something? Like, just what's your thoughts on the fact that they've still kind of picked those small school guys relatively, high in the draft?
I think that they were chasing players there. And I think, and I'm not sitting in the draft room with them, but I think you're seeing the influence of Loomis, who's still trying to treat this as a team that is maybe one player away. They took, hey man, they need a tackle. They're taking Penning. We talked about Davenport. I think that's not necessarily as much a reflection of Jeff or his propensity to take smaller school players as it was a team philosophy that was, hey, we're in a weak division. We just need a couple pieces here. If things go right and everything breaks the way it needs to, and this player works out, then we're good. But I think we've seen how that works out when you try to force those players. And that's why I'm expecting this, again, to be more of an Ireland draft with players from bigger conferences, because I think it's going to be, again, with so many needs, they're not chasing one player. Now, if they go out on Thursday and take Shadur Sanders, then I look like a complete idiot. Maybe they will. I don't know. But my impression is they're going to go out with so many needs and just try to let the board come to them, I guess.
This book, Value Picks, outstanding read, a lot of insight behind what happens in the draft and the behind-the-scenes stories. But I think they should make it a bundle buy. Your other book, you mentioned it, Scout Speak. I think it's a tremendous resource for anybody that just wants to learn about the game. You mentioned you have the foreword there, another behind-the-scenes story, Jeff Ireland kind of laying some stuff out. Just tell the people about that book and what they can get from that, and they can go on to Amazon, throw them both in their cart, and get the 2-for-1 special here.
Well, if the draft fascinates you and you kind of want to know a little bit more about how decisions are made and how scouts work, and if the war stories of how players are picked and all those kind of things interest you, then I think our last book especially would be good. The last 30 or 40 pages are nothing but stories that I got from scouts that I couldn't leave out. I mean, when I was writing that book, I was like, man, I've got all these stories. What am I going to do with them? Finally, I just said, you know what, I'm just going to throw them in the back of the book. And that's kind of the case for Value Picks as well. We've got, I think, 9 scouts who tell the story of their specific draft. And in those renditions of things, then they kind of will talk about the players that are spotlighted, Michael Thomas obviously being one of them, but also both the quarterbacks are at the top of the draft. Derrick Henry, who came out of that draft impossibly. I mean, it seems like he's getting better. It seems like he's getting younger instead of older. A number of those stories. So I think if the draft interests you and scouting in general interests you, and there just does seem to be a mystique about the way scouts work and the things they do, then hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. You can pick them up both for less than $30 and certainly have my appreciation as well.
That's Neil Stratton, the man behind Inside the League, the author of Scout Speak and Value Picks. Make sure you go check them out. They're on Amazon. Neil, thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you are signed up for the website. Use the code NOF, save 20% off your first payment. You get all of our draft coverage there. Me and B will be back on Wednesday, and we are going to have all your draft coverage leading into Thursday night. Talk to you then.